good. My next guest is Grace Stevens. As a former corporate girl, Grace quit VP life to pursue her dream job as a public school teacher. After 20 years in the classroom, she now focuses full-time on helping educators have a more positive teaching experience. Grace combines her signature mantra, "Your energy teaches more than your lesson plans," with 2 decades of study in behavioral therapy, positive psychology, and NLP to create science-based habits for overwhelmed educators. She has authored 3 books on teaching, including best-selling Positive Mindset Habits for Teachers, and also 1 New Habit book series. In addition to being an elementary school teacher for 20 years, she's also written these books and gives professional development. Welcome to the podcast, Grace.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
All right. So I should be embarrassed to say this because, my brand, should we say, is, positive mindset habits. But I did find myself, I think what I'm learning is you get in the trench more than once. It's not you get in it and you get out. Because I was in a trench before which led me to becoming a teacher, right? But I'm going to say I was about 17 years into my career as a teacher, and I found myself hiding in a closet during lunch, hyperventilating, sobbing, like all the things, totally overwhelmed, setting a timer on my phone. Like I got 10 minutes to get myself together until, I have to go get these kids, right? And like, where are my sunglasses? Like, I can't, like, they're going to be, got mascara down my face, the whole bit. And completely knowing at the time, like something has to change. I was new in a school district. There was a lot of reasons for it that I just felt completely overwhelmed and completely felt like I wasn't following my teacher compass. I had just really, I know what kids need. I know what I have to offer as a teacher. And I was in a new district and like super different from where I come from, very scripted, very kind of gotcha vibe, right? People come around with the clipboard and then leaving like without any feedback. Like that's not coaching, right? That's kind of policing. And so I had just felt so stifled and everything else. And I really was in bad shape. It was the silliest thing. A kid had asked me something like a question, and it wasn't even a disrespectful question. It was a question about science. And I was like, sure, we don't have time to answer that. Like, what kind of teacher is that, right? Like, you had to get on to the next thing. We were rotations. It was like everything was timed. And I guess I was really crying because that's not the type of teacher I wanted to be. Like, I don't want to teach like this. Like anything that is creative or joyful or those kind of tangents that lead to those, teachable moments, right? All of that had been like sucked out of the way they were doing business there because school was really a business there. So anyway, I really decided something needed to change. I got very lucky with the timing. It was just before Thanksgiving. My daughter was coming home. She lived on the East Coast, and she's an adult, also works in education. And I was still at school. I had moved to a school very close to our home. I could walk to school. And so she got home and she said, "Mom, I'm going to come over and see your classroom." And she was all excited. And I stepped outside the door to see her. And I remember as she was walking across campus, as soon as I saw her, I ran and I started to cry. Like, she'd be mortified, right? "Mom, what the actual heck," right? Calling me on my stuff. Like, "Mom, this is what you teach. How are you so overwhelmed?" And so anyway, Thanksgiving break came and I just really took time to reflect, like step back, look at all the things I know how to do and stop being intimidated. I'd listened to too many stories about, I was untenured, right? Yeah. Oh, I was new, I was an untenured. I'd been really comfortable in my old school, really well respected, but suddenly I'm in a new place, nobody knows me. And, I just listened to like, oh, these admins are out to get you, and just all the negative stuff, which I know better. Like one of the things I teach is, you can have your own teaching experience. Other people's experience doesn't need to be your experience, right? So I just kind of lost my way, took time over Thanksgiving to think about it and decided, like, when I go back, I'm going to teach the way I know how to teach. And if that isn't what people want, and if I don't get invited back next year, so be it.
Mhm.
And then along came COVID. And I have to tell you, it was lucky timing, I guess, because by the time I had spent like those 3 months, I remember we locked down like March 13th, right? After I went back after Thanksgiving, I just really invested time in classroom community and collaborative learning and all the things that I valued and knew how to do. And so when COVID came around, oh my gosh, I didn't know how to do Zoom school, right? But we all helped each other out. And I had created this culture where kids, I would teach in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I would have office hours if anybody was stuck or needed help to come to office hours, right? And other kids would show up to help students who were stuck on certain things. And I could put them in a breakout room, and it was just magical. And I ended up, this was a district who was very focused on data, like many of them are. And I had like the most kids participate in Zoom, the least missing assignments, like, right, all the stuff, right? Because we had a community and we were doing it, I would consider the right way, the way that felt good to me. So that was like my out of the trenches story, but it was mortifying to me. In fact, that very morning I had the first request I'd ever had to appear on a podcast. A lady who'd read my book and was doing a book study with her school, and she had a podcast, and she's like, come talk to us. And I was like, yeah. And then I find myself in a closet hiding, crying, like, oh my God, talk about imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to teach anybody anything? But I managed to get myself out of the trench. But that's something I think to recognize, especially with teaching. It's not like, oh, you're down and then you get yourself up and now you live happily ever after. Like, it takes constant vigilance to stay out of the trench, right? You've got to have those habits and those mindsets, and really work on it. You have to be intentional about it. That's really has been my experience, is needing to be intentional about your energy that you bring to the classroom, about being super mindful about not getting overextended, overwhelmed, frustrated, burned out, all the things, because that doesn't benefit anybody. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I think that is a valid reason that you were feeling so down, being in that new district, feeling like you were being judged, right?
Yeah.
And just having that anxiety around, like, they're coming around with clipboard, not knowing really what the culture of the district was.
Yeah.
But then you have that breaking point after your daughter came, and like, I need to just enjoy teaching again. So I wanted to ask, when did you write your books kind of in relation to that time period?
So I had written, I became a teacher in 2000. And then in 2012, I had written some other books, One New Habit book series. And one of them was called The Happy Habit. And I had done like a deep dive into it, like you said in the intro. I had quit a corporate career because I was stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, overextended, didn't feel like I participated in my life, even though from the outside, wow, what a life, right? I earned so much money, lived in a beautiful house, had these beautiful children. Like, it was just, you feel ridiculous, like, oh, I want something with purpose. But anyway, I decided to become a teacher, and straight off, like, oh, wow, it checked so many boxes for me. It had purpose. It was easy. It was fun. I could be creative, all those things. And then, so I thought becoming a teacher was magical. And then it wasn't. I found myself in the same spot. So then it was like, okay, so I got to change myself. I can't change careers again, right? So that's when I did that deep dive. So I wrote the book, The Happy Habit, and it was about 10 habits that I had been practicing and cultivating, and had really helped me change my life. And it wasn't geared towards teaching at all. And then a lot of teachers started asking me, when I taught in this small school, it's one class per grade. So we would all have basically the same kids, the same admin, the same parents. So you couldn't say, oh, you had different kids than me, or you had a different admin than me. But my experience was very different. And the kids working with me acted very differently. And so teachers started asking me about it. And so I turned it into like a little journal where you could check the habits. And then I ended up making it a book, I think in 2015. And then it was in 2017, I moved to this new school. No, 2019, I moved to the new school. And that was kind of my turning point. And then we had COVID. And then I wrote another book after that called The Post-COVID Classroom, about how things had changed. Because, wow, have they changed? And how to kind of manage that and the mindsets required to navigate that. So those are really, and then I had just published last year another book on setting boundaries for teachers, because that's one of the things that I find is the hardest for them. But like I say, there's a certain kind of humility that comes when you're sobbing in a closet and you're like, no, wait, I'm right about this. Like, but, would you really want to take swimming lessons from somebody who'd only ever read a book about it? That's how I feel. Like, you want to take swimming lessons from someone who's been in the water and figured it out, right? So I'm no longer kind of embarrassed to share the stories where I'm like, ugh, not my finest day teaching. And the funny thing about it was, it was just my energy. Like, I wasn't being the teacher I wanted to be. That was the crux of it. But the kids were like, oh, I mean, it was third grade. So they're still kind of in love with their teacher, right? And, I have an accent. I'm kind of fun, as much as I was able to be. So I would still be getting all the love notes. And, when a kid told me, oh, you're the best teacher I ever had, which, okay, it's only third grade. They've only had like 4. But still, you feel like, so like, really? Like, who the heck else have you had? Because I'm horrible right now. Right? It's just that worst feeling to feel that way, right? Like, oh my God, I'm the best you've had. Oh, I'm not showing up as my best. I mean, obviously, I'm not articulating that, but that's that feeling you have, right? I'm sure people can relate. We all have those days. Not everybody's showing up as their best self every day, but
yeah, and we're our worst critics. So
exactly, yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about you turned some of the lessons that you learned while writing your books into teacher PD. So talk a little bit about some of the PD that you provide in person or virtually.
So there's a couple of things. I do virtual PD for people only because when I had my big corporate career, I used to, get in a plane in the morning, drop my kids off at preschool, daycare, drive to the airport, get in the plane with my projector. Back in those days, you had to take it with you, do a presentation, get back on a plane, try and be home in time for bedtime. Like, that's what learned me to be burnt out. So I had made the decision when I decided to go full time into supporting teachers. Like, yeah, no, I'm not getting on planes anymore. We all know how to work Zoom now. So I do virtual PD. And then I also offer courses. I work with educators one-on-one. I have courses they can purchase and group coaching and such. But mostly the topics I talk about are about the science of happiness as one. Like, according to the science, teachers should be happier. And setting boundaries and overcoming the myth of balance. I don't think it's, when you say, oh, you need to have balance in your life, you got to integrate them. You can't, school and home, there's never going to be a perfect balance. Something's always going to be getting less of you, and you need to be about strategic about planning that. So that's the type of thing. Now, the other type of PD that I do, I will say it takes a really enlightened admin to hire me for, is coaching on boundaries. So there's not too many admins want to hire me to coach their staff in how to say no to them. But that is something that that I do, teaching educators who, as a whole, we are very, people pleasing. We're here to help, right? And so it's kind of our culture that we take on more and we take on more, and we get easily guilted into taking on more because it's for the kids and all those things. And so I help educators reframe their beliefs around setting boundaries, which some people, think is, oh, you'll be seen as inflexible or this or that. It's like, no, you will be a better teacher. We need to overcome this myth that the teacher who works the most is the best teacher. It's not true. Might be true. They might happen to be the best teacher, but not because they work the most. And so anyway, so that's kind of the PD that I do.
Okay, yeah, and I do think there are admin who would be open to coaching on setting boundaries because, those are the people that you hear about. They find dead at their desks after having a heart attack, right? And I think admin are becoming more and more aware of the need for self-care and, leaving work at work and those types of things.
Yeah,
So,
no. So I have to tell you something. That's the reason I was in the closet. Like, why were you in the closet? I'll tell you why, because it was a traffic pattern to my room was a traffic pattern to the copier. And so other teachers would walk through. For some reason, they had some master key that they could just open my door and walk through, and I just needed to be alone. But when I was in the closet, I was so afraid, like, oh my God, like I need to set the timer. I need to not be late to pick up the kids, because I had worked with somebody who one of their colleagues had died on their prep period in their classroom, right? Come on, people. Like, come on. How is your family ever going to get over that? How are the kids ever going to get over that? Right. And so I was so mindful, like, they can't be looking for me in a closet. Like, it's just, yeah, it's crazy. And I have to say, admins need to learn to set boundaries too. They're more exhausted than the rest of us. And I feel like if admins could learn to set proper boundaries with people above them who have maybe some agenda that isn't necessarily always geared towards the children, that trickles down to us. Like, we teachers rely on our admins to like kind of run interference for us, right? With all the stuff that's required, some of which is not really mission critical to student success. It's mission critical to another agenda. Like, I always thought a good admin would be somebody who would run interference for that and just say, no, I'm not going to ask my staff to do that. So I think they need to know how to set boundaries in a way that's, professional and gracious and student focused. There's the magic answer there. I'm not teaching teachers to say, oh, well, that's not in my contract. No. But to say, based on the needs of my students for X, Y, Z reasons, I feel my time would be better used this way. If you can give a student-focused reason, not like, oh, it's not in my contract, then you're going to be more successful setting boundaries, and it's going to be more comfortable for you.
Well, talk to me about some ways teachers can feel more empowered. You told me you have a 4-part framework for that.
I do. So I have, what could we be without our acronyms? So it's an ECHO framework, ECHO. And I kind of like that because, what you put out comes back. That's the basic principle. But the E is your energy speaks more than your lesson plans, right? So that's really the foundation of everything that I do, is how you show up matters. And students, you don't even need to be a teacher to know this. You just needed to have gone to school. That the teachers you learn the most from are the ones who seem passionate, excited about being there. Maybe they don't have the most perfect lesson plans with emojis all over them and, the Pinterest-worthy classroom. Who cares? Their energy is good. You feel from them that they care about you, that they feel you can succeed, right? That they're excited about you succeeding, right? So that's the premise of everything, why you got to avoid being burnt out and resentful and overwhelmed and crying in the closet, right? Your energy teaches more than your lesson plans. So that's the E. The C is control what you can control. Right? We've got to stop being victims. There are so many issues in education, so many, and it's valid. I'm not saying, oh, there aren't issues. There are so many, and they need to be addressed. But at the same time, if you control what you can control, you will feel more empowered. And for me, that was always my little classroom, my community, how we treated each other, how we valued learning. I would focus on things I could control and try not to get dragged into that vortex of other people's drama on campus. And again, not to say that their drama isn't valid, but like, there's enough drama in my own room. I don't need to be really super upset about something that's happening to somebody else. If I want a reason to be upset, I could find them in my own room. So, right, kind of isolate yourself a little bit is to control what you can control. Then the H is happiness can be synthesized. So that was a huge part of my journey. Came from a background with a family with, let's say, a constellation of mental health issues, some of which I inherited. And I needed to really, that was my deep dive into neurolinguistic programming and other stuff, learning how to really establish habits that could boost my happiness set point. So happiness can be synthesized. And I feel like I wrote about that a long time ago, and people are much more open to that idea now. So that's really cool. And then the last one, the teacher's experience doesn't need to be your experience. You can have your own experience. And I got to tell you, when I was in that trench and I was absorbing all of that, oh, this guy does this, he does that, he does the other, I had to literally pull out a piece of paper and write down, what is my experience with the principal? It was all good. There wasn't a thing I could point to. We taught with smart boards. I told him I wanted a dot cam. Got me a dot cam the next day. When he did come through the room, other people came through with the clipboards. He also came through with a clipboard. But, he sent me an email afterwards. Hey, here's what I loved, and here are some things you could do. And I will say, he transferred after I had been there a year. I learned more from him in that year than I had learned from any other admin, who had literally just always said, oh, fantastic, great. So, my experience of him when I actually wrote it down was like, no, he's fair, he's consistent. Is he a stickler? Yes. Is he kind of awkward? Yeah. There were some things, but my experience of him, I didn't feel hunted, victimized. I didn't feel like he was out to get me, right? And so I needed to, have my own experience of that person. And we know that we need to have our own experience of kids, right? When they come in our room, I never look at that. Do you know what the pinks and blues are? The little slips that you get from the previous year, and the teacher writes on them, about the kid and services they have or whatever, and then they write personal comments. I never look at them. Like, I never do. Like, I want to make my own mind up about these students. Your experience of them doesn't need to be my experience of them. I had a co-worker when we worked in the other school, and it was always, small school. And when we would go to the lunchroom, she would be coming out, having dropped off her kids as my kids were walking in. And every day she would say to me, may check these kids next year. Just, okay, firstly, there are kids listening. And secondly, like, I would be like, oh, sounds like you're having a tough day. Maybe they'll mature over summer. Like, I would just kind of blow it off. And sure enough, the following year, then wasn't always perfect, but it was certainly not the class that I would like say this is the worst class I've ever seen. She would say that every year, like 17 years in a row. This is the worst class I've ever seen. Like, really? Pretty crazy.
Well, those are the people that really shouldn't be in education.
Yeah. Well, when you think of their energy, right? I mean, lovely lady, and she really did care about kids, I have to say. But yeah, just a very just negative role models of, I think, she'd had of how to communicate. So anyway, but yeah, have your own experience of the kids. I don't look at the cards. I mean, if there's something I need to know specifically about a special need they have, but other than that, maybe they won't work. Maybe they won't act that way for me. Maybe they will, but I like to find out for myself, right? I'd not want to kind of make that decision before we even get going, right?
Sure. And the O in your framework?
Oh, that was it. Other people's experience doesn't need to be your experience.
Okay. Okay. And then let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you've outlined in your most recent book around toxic positivity, because I know a lot of teachers are very aware of, that's something that's kind of a pet peeve for them.
Yeah, it is. So that's kind of, it's real. It is real. So toxic positivity is really when you're just kind of ignoring the issues and just wanting to be, a little cheerleader about it. And I'm gonna liken that to, let's say you're driving and your gas tank is almost on empty, and you just put a smiley face sticker on it. Like, so that's toxic positivity, is when, hey, positive vibes only, or even something like, we're family, we're superheroes. No, We're not. This is a job and we're human, and people need to be validated. And there's a difference between validating somebody and saying, hey, here's all the issues that we have. What are ones we can do about? What's within our control? And the ones that we can't do something about, how can we strategize? How can we make it better? Like ask empowering questions, not just tell people, oh, my pet peeve was do the best you can. I remember one of the things before my little, hiding in the closet breakdown was I literally couldn't do everything that was being asked of me in the time frame I had. Like if you added up the minutes in the day, like
Sure.
they don't actually add up, right? Like if I'm doing 120 minutes of this and 20 minutes of that, even if you allowed for zero transition time, like as soon as the bell went, kids were in their desk, like you didn't have to walk them somewhere and you didn't have to like, unravel some playground drama, right? Like even if it was a magical situation where you had no downtime, the minutes didn't add up. We were always being forced to like, make sure you get in your PE minutes. We had to do our own PE. Like there's not enough minutes. And then when you would take it to somebody and they'd say, well, just do your best. Well, that's not helpful. That's not a strategy. So yeah, there's a difference between taking accountability, managing the piece you can manage, maintaining, like investing in authentic self-care, like setting boundaries, and all the things, and having, a culture that's toxically positive, like, yeah, we believe in you. Yeah, the little stickers and the things are nice, but what it comes down to is, listen, I'm totally stressed. I'm in a bad shape. I want to take a mental health day tomorrow. Like, I don't want to hear you don't have subs. That's not a really supportive environment, right? It's like, you could have not given me like I said, the little snack with them saying, which are all very nice, but that doesn't, it doesn't make up for authentically supporting staff in a way that is positive, that says, you know what, hey, you know yourself best. If you feel that you need to take your time, which you have, which you're entitled to have a few mental health days, go ahead and take it. No subs, that's my problem. I'll figure it out. That's not for you to worry about. Right.
Sure,
so there's kind of a difference about that, right? It's what I kind of call fake fun. Like, oh, we have a fun, I taught elementary school, so we always had the school spirit weeks, right? There's no amount of pajama days and crazy hair days that really can make up for for what's going on, and that's just adding stress to your day. I remember one time it was during state testing that we had a spirit week. How am I dealing with crazy hair day and trying to get kids to do their best?
That's crazy.
It's like, come on, people. But it's like, no, we're positive and this testing is fun. No, it isn't. And it's okay. But like now I got to manage your water bottle is falling off your head that your mom spent 3 hours on, like, come on. So I know people know what I'm talking about. It's kind of a little crazy. And I think admins are trying to do their best. I think part of the problem is admins don't know what to do. Sure. And so they're kind of reaching at straws, but investing in real strategies that support teachers and campus culture that doesn't always kind of celebrate, like, but before, goodness, I remember before COVID, it was such a big deal. Staff members who had perfect attendance, like, why are you rewarding staff for perfect attendance? Where people get sick, people's family members get sick, people die, right? Like we can't always have perfect attendance, and to put that kind of stress on teachers, like to celebrate it, it's like that's not terribly supportive in the long run. I'm sure people think, oh, well, we're giving you a certificate for it. I would rather that you were supportive if I needed time off, didn't rush me back after I had surgery, didn't call me at home. True story. Had an emergency appendectomy, was at home recovering, and the principal calling me, oh, your class is behaving really poorly for the sub, how soon do you think you can be back? Like, when the doctor says it's okay, that's when I can come back, right? Like if the sub can't handle it, like,
Get another
At this,
sub.
yeah, like at this point, what are you doing today? Get in the classroom, right?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's just, but it's not, I'm not alone in those stories. I'm not exaggerating, right? Like I saw you go like, oh, like, no, you know, it happens. You know,
Yeah.
it happens. Yeah. So,
Mhm, mhm. Well, kind of back to that boundaries piece.
uh-huh.
What are some common misconceptions that teachers have around boundaries and, being like in charge of setting their own boundaries?
Well, there's a couple. One misconception is that boundaries are about other people's behavior,
Mhm.
right? Like, oh, I can't, these people won't change or whatever.
Yeah.
Boundaries aren't about anybody else's behavior. They're about what you're going to do
Mhm.
differently, right? Like I always, I have a boundary that, if a parent was getting hostile or yelling or whatever, which was very, very rare, usually had very positive relationships. But you know what happens? People have terrible days. You're talking about their children. That's their most precious thing to them in the world, right? I sometimes people say, well, I can't change the way the parent talks to me. No, you can't change anybody, but you can change how you show up. And so I did have a boundary that if a parent was getting hostile or yelling or whatever, I would just say, you know what, this no longer feels productive,
Sure.
so I'm going to hang up. And I'm going to request that when, we've calmed down, we can approach this in a different way. And, no hard feelings. I understand you're upset, validate somebody, but, it's no longer productive. And I have a rule for myself that I don't participate in unproductive conversations. And then, and behave accordingly. So that's the first misconception, that it's about somebody else's behavior. It's not. The second misconception is that people see you as inflexible if you have boundaries and selfish. And so a lot of teachers fear judgment because of this kind of collective martyr kind of thing we have going on, that I'll do anything for my students, and I'll do anything for the school. And so people who, silently judge others who leave on time or don't sign up for as many adjuncts or all those things. People fear judgment, but you got to run your own race. You got to not be concerned what other people think. And if you know in your own heart that what you're doing is maintaining your positive energy and enthusiasm and all the things, my dad always said, one volunteer is worth 10 forced men. So like, I really want to put my energy in things I'm excited about doing, because there were many years, oh my gosh, I did some things for the school. I put on a digital planetarium, I put on a star lab, an astronomy night, like all of those things took hours and hours and hours of my life. And I loved it, right? The kids loved it. I loved it. It was something I was interested in doing. And so it was of course, it was outside my contract. Who cared? I loved doing it. It energized me. The kids loved it. And, that's way different than me getting guilted into being in like a curriculum committee, unpacking the standards, whatever, where you'd like rather stick an ice pick in your eye than stay in that meeting for another 5 minutes, right? I call those ice pickers. Like, I would rather stick an ice pick in my eye. Yeah, I had a teaching partner, did not want to do anything with kids after school. He was done with kids by the end of school. He never had kids, in fact, but he was a really good teacher, really good role model for these kids. But at the end of the day, absolutely did not want to tutor or do anything with kids, coach. He would love to sign up for the curriculum committee. Good for him. So do the things you want to do the things you're passionate about, and don't worry that other people think you're, inflexible. And then know the difference between, not all boundaries have to be rigid. So some, it's okay to have needs and preferences and desires. Those are all boundaries. And then you do have some non-negotiables, right? But you can be flexible on some of those. Like for me, it was always a standard, I won't work the weekends. I'll work hard during the week, but I'm not working the weekends. But, once a year we had a fundraiser on a Saturday. Sure, no big deal, right? But another non-negotiable will be, you're in the staff room, the den of iniquity, and somebody's saying something very unpleasant about a student, or maybe a joke that they think that's funny that isn't really cool. I'm usually going to say something like, I'm uncomfortable with saying that about a person when they're not here to defend themselves, or like, that's kind of my non-negotiable. Um, so everybody has to decide for themselves. But it's okay to have needs and desires and preferences. We're human, and setting boundaries, in fact, makes you a better teacher,
Mhm.
not a lesser teacher.
Mhm. Mhm. So you told me that you have free resources. Where can people find you have a free training video? You also
Yeah.
have courses,
Yeah.
and then you're going to start your own podcast this fall.
I am starting my podcast. Thanks for asking about that. I'm kind of excited about that. Yeah, that's going to be called Empower Ed. And so empowering, that's, I call myself a teacher empowerment coach at this point. I feel like teachers need some coaching. We were never taught how to set boundaries. It's not our fault, right? It's not our fault. This is kind of like the kind of inheritance that we got, right? Of being, so self-sacrificing to the point of just being exhausted. So anyway, so that's the podcast. But yes, no, people can find me at gracestevens.com, and that's Stevens with a V. And then if you go to gracestevens.com/happy, there's like a video training there, like a little mini masterclass on the 5 habits of the least stressed, most productive educators. So I think that's a good place for people to start if they're interested in figuring out what kind of habits could help them overcome and this kind of burnout, overwhelm cycle.
Mhm. Well, we've had a great conversation today
Yes.
about just your story of really, feeling in the trenches because of the situation of being in a new school and, taking everything to heart and then turning that around. And then the work that you now do with teachers. Out of everything we talked about on the podcast, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I would say that you're in control of your teaching experience.
Mhm.
That's it. Other people's experience doesn't need to be yours. I mean, yes, is it as a whole? Are we overwhelmed, underpaid, not respected? Our behaviors off the wall, like all the things that, So I would say just really remember that and do what you need to do to maybe isolate yourself a little bit from that very negative narrative right now. So even though, I know that snarky teacher memes are very funny and all those things, but your mind is the most fertile soil in the universe. That's something I've learned over the years. And I'm just very mindful of what I put in it. I think we all know that if we eat junk food and, we're not going to perform at our best. But I think not enough people pay attention to what we put in our consciousness. Like, what are you listening to? What are you watching? Because that can really bring you down. If all your, there are algorithms in all of social media, they'll just keep giving you whatever you've watched before, right? And so you watch one negative thing or hear one negative story, and then the algorithm's like, okay, well, that's what you want to hear, and they'll keep giving it to you, and soon you think that's all there is out there. Right. And so I would caution people to be a little mindful, listen to things that make you feel uplifted and empowered, and so that would really be my one takeaway. My favorite quote, I have to say, is from Albert Einstein, who said the most important decision you ever have to make, decision, is whether you think you live in a friendly or a hostile universe. And I want to live in a friendly universe where I feel students, teachers, co-workers, admins are doing the best they have with the skills they have in the situation they find themselves in. And I just feel it's hard to feel like you live in a friendly universe if you're constantly consuming the negative stuff, right? Because like I said, the algorithm is just, it's just designed to keep giving you more of what you're looking for. So look for the good stuff. There's plenty of it out there. Plenty of it out there.
Well, thank you so much for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure having you on. And,
Thanks.
I'm glad there's resources that you have for teachers and can reach out to you and, get more empowerment over their situation and become happier in their jobs. It was
Yeah,
a
because
great,
that benefits everybody,
yeah,
especially
great,
the students, right?
yeah, it's
Well,
a
thank
great.
you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.